The very birthplace of the Arab Spring has now become a scene of chaos in an attack, killing foreign tourists in the capital. Tunisia, which had been held up as a somewhat successful and stable nation, even with hiccups it suffered along the way with political instability and assassinations, is now suffering, seemingly from spillover effects of ISIL's presence in Libya. In this edition of the debate, we'll address what this latest terror attack in Tunis means for the country and how North Africa will, as a whole, deal with its increasing instability.
No to terrorism in Tunisia. This is the slogan of ralliers who have been demonstrating against the act of violence in Tunisia over the past 2 days. The protests are in reaction to a terrorist attack on a national museum in the capital on Wednesday that left 19 foreign and 2 Tunisian nationals dead.
I'm here today as a citizen that believes in democracy and a civil state. I came here to make my voice heard against terrorism and against all cowardly acts of aggression on civilians that seeks to impose opinions by force.
Following the attack, which also left dozens of people injured, Tunisia's president announced new security measures.
There is coordination between all the departments of state, whether military or interior. This cooperation needs to continue because we are in a state of high alert. In fact, many even call it a war. In any case, if it's not a war in a legal sense, it is a war in a practical sense.
The Interior Ministry, which has arrested 9 suspects in relation with the incident, has released information about 2 gunmen killed in firefight with the security forces. According to the ministry, they were among Tunisians who left the country for Libya and received military training in militant camps there. In the face of the growing threats from its restive neighbor, the Tunisian government says it will boost security at borders.
We reinforce the protection of our borders, and this task will be taken by both the armed forces and the police.
Wednesday's attack has raised concerns over backlash for Tunisia's tourism industry, which is the country's main source of revenue. As the ISIL Takfiri group claims responsibility for the terror attack, there are also fears about the spread of terrorism and extremism to North African countries. It is estimated that some 3,000 people, mostly from Tunisia's young generation, have left the country to fight along extremist groups in Iraq and Syria. About 500 of them have returned home. Many believe poverty, unemployment and corruption are major factors pushing young people to groups such as ISIL. Tunisia, the cradle of popular revolutions that swept the Arab world in 2011, is the only nation that emerged from the subsequent unrest with a fledgling democracy. However, the country seems to have a bumpy road ahead, especially when it comes to addressing the difficulties facing the nation.
Let's now introduce our guests for this edition of the debate. We're joined by the Executive Director of the iWatch organization, Mr. Mouheb Garoui, who is joining us live now from the Tunisian capital, Tunis. And we're also joined by author and political commentator, Dr. Saeb Shaath, who is joining us live from Belfast. Gentlemen, thanks very much for joining us for this edition of the debate. Mr. Garoui, I'd like to start with you. Who benefits, do you think, from this instability in Tunisia, such as the attack seen on the museum in the capital?
I think thank you first for having me with you today. I think the beneficiaries of this attack are the terrorists who targeted innocent civilians for the first time in Tunisia after the revolution. I think they benefit from this bloody and cowardice attack on civilians. And I think also those who have opposed the basics and the pillars of the revolution, which are the freedom of expression, democracy and human rights, are the beneficiaries of this bloody attack.
And then, Dr. Shaath, I wanted to put the same question to you, essentially. Who do you think benefits from this instability in Tunisia, of course, in the context of the fact that North Africa as a whole right now seems quite unstable?
There is a lot of players. They want to see Tunisia not going to succeed in its democratic process and not going to end its revolution, establishing a successful system, and nobody have monopoly on power except the ballot box. Lots of people do want to see that. In Libya, the chaos in Libya, they want to use Tunisia as well to join the chaos and mayhem in Libya. So the whole front will spread up to reach Algeria as well, to engulf the area, connect with Egypt. This is the whole process, to see the area engulf in kind of chaos. And there is a lot of forces behind that. The ones who finance and train these Takfiri forces to attack Syria, to attack Iraq, and to blow their booby-trapped cars and suicide bombs in Yemen, are the same sponsors for these groups in Tunisia. So the beneficiary in there, they do want to see a stable democratic country in Tunisia, and there is people in Arabia suffering from practically slavery.
Okay, Mr. Garoui, I'm trying to understand, because Tunisia, it seems at least, prides itself on being secular to a certain extent, even before the revolution did take place there. How exactly do you think then ISIL was even able to enter the country?
I think it's, as mentioned in your report, Tunisia is the #1 exporter in the world of jihadists or terrorists in Syria and Libya and Iraq. And it's the estimated number of 3,000 or 4,000 young jihadists fleeing the country towards the neighboring countries. I think the level of corruption that Tunisia has reached, and the level of lack of transparency in the Tunisian governance system, is one of the drivers of letting these terrorists enter the country and move freely and get arms and enter the Bardo Museum, which is closer to the parliament. And for your information, maybe the terrorists' destination, or the main destination of the terrorists, was not the museum, but it was the parliament, which is 2 steps from the museum. But they were blocked by the Tunisian security, and they were obliged to face their fate with the Tunisian security forces inside the museum. So I think the level of corruption that Tunisia has reached, and the lack of vision and strategy to combating terrorism since the revolution, has paved the way, let's say, to letting these people come back and with arms, and they attack civilians. And if we don't set this kind of strategy together with the stakeholders like the government, the parliament, the civil society and media, I think we will not be able to face this threat. I think we should be honest with ourselves. We should establish this new accountability system within the security forces and the military, so that Tunisia would foster its efforts towards combating terrorism and combating this phenomenon, which is new to Tunisia, actually, because we have never faced this terrorist attacks on civilians since 2002, when there was a terrorist attack on a Jewish place in southern Tunisia. But now, after, let's say, 13 years that Tunisia witnesses this attack on civilians, and this creates polemic now in Tunisia, creates debates over the strategy and the vision of politicians and decision makers towards combating terrorism. And we, as civil society, we have denounced this attack, and we also have denounced the lack of political will to combat terrorism, which is now getting closer and closer to the capital, to Tunis, the capital, and to the birthplace of the Tunisian constitution, which is the parliament. And I think also we support the Tunisian military, and we support Tunisian police forces in their fight against terrorism, but we also should mention that we are also criticizing the Tunisian forces for not deploying the necessary efforts to combating this phenomenon also as well.
Okay, Dr. Shaath, I wanted to get your opinion on that, because, Mr. Garoui, they're putting the onus on the Tunisian leadership itself. How do you feel about that? Because in the context of North Africa, as I put the question earlier as well, it seems that the entire region is unstable, but how much onus and responsibility should the Tunisian leadership itself take as well?
There is 3 players here. I want to mention them by the name. The late King Hassan of Morocco, Mubarak, and before him Sadat, and Ben Ali. They were the agents of United States of America in the area. Mubarak, Sadat, Mubarak, and King Hassan, they used to have what they call it safari forces to act on behalf of the United States of America before it established its OFCOM, the African Command, and used to send forces as assassination squad and do all the dirty work of the United States of America. Ben Ali hosted a lot of Muslim fanatics and takfiris in Tunisia as a service for the United States of America as well, since Tunisia, we know, as you mentioned in your report, is the biggest exporter of these takfiris to the Arab world. And from there, after Ben Ali, and he used to actually use the Tunisian prisons to torture for the United States of America, the prisoners. These secret American CIA flights used to land in Tunisia a lot during Ben Ali time. Since 2011, after his fall, Tunisia have been battling jihadist group. They call themselves Uqba bin Nafi', the brigades of Uqba bin Nafi'. And they used to attack only police forces and military squads and military brigades. The group is part of Al-Qaeda in north of Africa, and its base itself in El Sha'naibi mountain. It's the highest peak in Tunisia bordering Algeria. If we look at the location bordering Algeria, and we remember what happened in the Gaza station in Algeria as well, so the whole area as well designed not just Libyan chaos, designed to bring and spread the chaos over to Algeria. So we know Algeria is wealthy with oil. Tunisia is not that wealthy. Tunisia today losing tourism. But as well, we notice there is other players coming on here and bragging about it. First of all, we notice the French President Francois Hollande sending his Interior Minister Bernard Cazeneuve, and he is the one who leading all the work, investigation, everything. The head of the EU and the EU Foreign Minister Federica Mogherini is saying they are going to Tunisia on the end of this month, 31st of March. The head of the EU Foreign Affairs or EU Minister, she said herself, the attack on Tunisia is an attack on Europe. Europe should respond. We didn't respond to the attack on Charlie Hebdo in France or anywhere in Europe, but now Europe has to respond to the attack on Tunisia. This is neo-colonial forces going to take its own colonies, the Tunisian colony. And if we notice the date as well, today Tunisia is memorizing its independence from France. And today we see France taking over the Interior Minister in Tunisia. So there is European players in here. They want to see chaos in North of Africa. They want to take over North Africa. They want to loot the wealth of Libya and Algeria, using their own old guards who were in Tunisia and these kind of fanatic groups who actually act in the Arab world on behalf of the empire, on behalf of the Western forces.
Okay, let's just take a quick time out and get to some of our viewer comments as posted on our social media pages. We'll listen to some of those comments and we'll be right back.
Just to create terror and justify it in the name of jihad and Sharia law. Simply, they wanted to weaken Tunisia's economy and cause distraction and spread fear among people so that it will be easy for foreign governments to involve in our personal matter on the ground, that they will help us protect our country or finance the country in case of economic crisis, and thus enhance the debts on the country and impose harsh conditions which put the country under their shoes and thus indirect colonization. ISIL does not want any achievement but destruction since they have been recognized. They are working on the basis of the ideology of the Saudi government to implement Wahhabism all over the world, which is against Islam and humanity.
Again, just some of our viewer comments on this topic. I want to put one of those comments, in fact, to Mr. Garoui, our guest who's joining us live from Tunis. Mr. Garoui, I'm wondering about this issue of the economy, something that Dr. Saeb Shaath also mentioned. You know, Tunisia is dependent largely on tourism as well. I would imagine that this will do no favors for Tunisia going forward, especially because foreign tourists were killed.
Yeah, I think Tunisia is, unfortunately, let's say, depending on tourism, which is also depending on the security and stability of security in Tunisia. And whenever there is acts of terrorism, we always fear shocked, and we feel that terrorism is over in Tunisia, and the 500,000, 500,000 people who are working directly or indirectly in tourism would be jobless for months. So I think Tunisia is depending on tourism, which is not something sustainable, because tourism is not for 12 months. Tourism in Tunisia is just for 3-4 months, and that's it. So I think it's a matter of vision. As I said, it's a matter of how to sustain your economy, how to sustain your businesses, so that Tunisia would not be affected, Tunisia's economy, I mean, would not be affected by any attacks or any, let's say, incidents that would deteriorate economy. So before talking about terrorism or before talking about the threats of extremism, let's talk about education, let's talk about health, and let's talk about the whole economic system that Tunisia has been adopting since decades. And there has never been a national dialogue over these questions that remained as a taboo in Tunisia. So now we're talking anti-terrorism. Now we're talking about strategies to counter this threat of extremism. Yes, we should do that, but also we should find the justifications of these threats. These people who fled to Syria and Iraq, these 4,000 people, they did not come out of the blue. They are coming from Tunisia. They're coming from the marginalized areas where they did not find recognition. So these young people were looking for recognition because they were marginalized in Tunisia. So instead of blaming the others, let's start with ourselves. Let's reassess and revisit our economy. Let's revisit our education. Let's revisit our whole system before blaming the others and before putting the blame on these 17 to 19 to 21 years old who are considered now as takfiris and jihadists and who have destroyed their future because they couldn't find anything to do in this country. So I think we should question ourselves. We should also hold politicians and all the stakeholders who have contributed to this situation, to this very disappointing, let's say, situation. We should hold them accountable. We should question ourselves. We should also revisit all the basics of our second, which is called the Second Republic, and we should also reinforce the Constitution, bearing in mind, and we should also bear in mind that countering terrorism and fighting terrorism should not prevent us from let's say, protecting the basics of human rights, protecting the basics of the Tunisian constitution, which is considered as the most progressive constitution in the MENA region. Also, we should question our accountability and governance system and who is doing what. Now in Tunisia, we have never seen a high-level official being held accountable or questioned or being invited to a hearing session and he resigned. And this is what we're looking for. We're looking for putting people and holding people accountable so that they recognize their mistakes. The attack on Bardo Museum was thanks or due to a mistake by the Tunisian security forces who did not anticipate the attack. So now in Tunisia we're talking about investigations, we're talking about committees and commissions to investigate this attack. And we all know the results of these commissions in Tunisia. There has been hundreds and dozens of commissions created after the revolution, and nothing came out of these commissions. So now we want real investigation, we want independent investigation, and we recommend also the implication of Tunisian civil society, independent Tunisian civil society in this process.
Dr. Shaath, it seems that from what our other guest is describing is that essentially it seems that the revolution is still continuing. You know, the old guard, many of the old ministers are still in place or have been put back in place. How much of this goes back to governance in Tunisia?
I would like to agree with a lot of what your guest is saying, but before he can do all of what beautifully proposed, all these liberal ideas, and ideas about liberty and freedom of the human rights, which I totally stand with and agree. Tunisia needs to achieve, first of all, its full sovereignty. Tunisia needs to achieve a full, real independence on the ground. No foreign forces or foreign actors or organizations or even companies, multinational companies, dictate to Tunisia what it's doing. Tunisia have these security forces, or the army is there to oppress the people. All what we see is cosmetic in Tunisia today. Even the democratic process is cosmetic. Even the political parties in Tunisia is cosmetic. There is no real sovereignty in Tunisia. The day the Tunisian people impose their sovereignty on their country and kick all these foreign actors from interfering, as I mentioned, the EU actors, the French, who try to take Tunisia now back to the old days as a colony. This has to be stopped. And then the Tunisian people can decide and can draw the best constitution if he wants. What is the use of a beautiful constitution when you cannot apply it on the ground? What is beautiful when you cannot even guarantee the human rights or guarantee jobs in there or guarantee those people can share their wealth? That's the wealth, tourism, all of that belongs to big multinational Western companies. And the other side of that, the financier for the Tunisian budget and all of that, the other side is Gulf states. And these Gulf states from the Arabian Peninsula, they don't want to see a successful system in Tunisia. So their people in Arabia will demand another system like that. They don't want to see that. They want to see chaos. I want to just mention who is who we have in the Middle East. These states, I want to mention them by name. Saudi Arabia and the other branch of it is Jordan. They were established by the British mandate after occupying Palestine and establishing the entity.
Unfortunately, Dr. Shaath, unfortunately, Dr. Shaath, I'm going to have to interrupt you there. I do apologize. It seems we have, unfortunately, run out of time. But, of course, we will try to continue this discussion at a later date with both of you gentlemen, if we can. That was Mr. Mouheb Garoui, who is with the Executive Director of iWatch organization, and he was speaking to us live from the Tunisian capital, Tunis. And we were also joined by author and political commentator, Dr. Saeb Shaath, who had been speaking to us live from Belfast. And, of course, viewers, we do appreciate you joining us as well. And, of course, your comments as posted on our social media pages. Until next time, good night.